Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Breaking Through the Noise. My name is Doug Goodwin, and I am your host on this weekly webinar. And the webinar is put on by Udemy. We make smart software for the future of work, currently working with companies helping with COVID-19, also virtual events, helping them do their trade shows and their hiring and all sorts of things. Anything that you can do to replace a in-person meeting or event well beyond what your national webcast type solutions are doing. And then also performance management, which is our core to begin with. So I do want to remind everybody who's in the chat room, please take advantage of the chat, post your information. This whole Breaking Through the Noise is all about sharing big ideas. I mean, that's what it is. And the more you participate, the more you get out of it. So please, put your comments in the chat room. Feel free to share your LinkedIn if you want to connect with people. That's all good stuff. So I want to jump right into this because I think we have a tremendous guest today who is just I almost feel like this time was built for Bonnie. So our guest is Bonnie Curtis. She is the Chief Human Resources Officer at the Castellini Group of Companies. Today we're going to learn from Bonnie how she's led her essential organization through this pandemic. So Bonnie, it's great to see you again, and welcome to Breaking Through the Noise.
Thank you so much.
So this is a crazy time, and I know the ironic, I'm sure you've forgotten about this, but we were actually supposed to talk that evening, the day that this all began, and you called me and said, hey, I can't talk, here's what's going on.
Yes.
And I hung up the phone and I thought, good Lord, how is she going to do this? So my first question would be, have you ever been in this situation before? You seem to have an instinct for what to do that other people did not have. So have you experienced something like this before?
I went through Y2K, for those of us that are old enough to remember that. I was living in China at the time, and we kind of had to scrabble this whole thing together. Probably the closest thing I've ever done to this, again, when I was living in China, was SARS. So I was living at the epicenter. We had a maid. She came home one night and said, there's something going on. I said, what do you mean? She said, you can't buy vinegar in the store. I said, what? She said, there's some disease and everybody's buying vinegar and boiling it to get it out of the air in their homes. I said, what are you talking about? And it was probably 2 months later before the Chinese government finally said, yes, we have a problem. So we stayed through the whole epidemic. Most of my friends came home for various reasons. We decided to stay. My husband, we had 4 children. My mother calling me every week saying, come home, what are you doing there? And so we figured out how to navigate through that. It was masks. It was nobody touching anybody. It was, if you're sick, stay home. It was going in elevators with your elbow like this so you didn't have to touch the buttons. So when this started, for me, this was like, okay, this is SARS 2.0. Here we go again. So I think I had a real benefit from having lived through that. I still have friends that live in China that were in Wuhan at the center of this when it was all erupting, that I was able to talk to what's happening there. So I think that just helped us get a jump on this.
Okay, so you had a leg up on all this just from past experience and also friends at the epicenter. Just after I did vinegar work.
No, of course not.
When you were describing that, I'm like, what in the world is that?
But it was the early indicator that something was going on, right?
Well, that'll do it. I know my early indicators. I literally was on the way home, and I said, my wife said, hey, stop into Kroger, we need a few things. And I'm like, is this a holiday? It was like the day before Thanksgiving. It was insane. I'm like, what is going on? And I've been working all day. I don't pay attention to the radio, what's going on in the world. So it was a shock for me too. So interesting. Well, that's good. So the experience in China really paid off in ways I'm sure you never expected it to.
And I think there were 2 other things that I benefited from. One, I have a great boss. Yeah. So every time I went to him and said, I think we need to start doing this, he pretty much said yes. There were very few things through this whole thing where he said no. And I have a lot of friends in HR who did not have bosses that said yes. Yeah. And so that enabled me to go do a bunch of things I may not have been able to do otherwise. The other thing is, even though I'm in HR now, I spent my whole career in supply chain at Procter & Gamble. I worked in factories. I worked in warehouses. So as I was putting a lot of these plans together, I kind of knew what I was asking people to do, what I was asking the operations managers, I need you guys to do this. I put myself on the other side of that and said, this is not ridiculous. It's difficult, but it's not ridiculous. So I'm going to push hard and ask you to do it. So I think all of those things, as you said, sort of lined up in a perfect storm in my favor.
Excellent. So tell us a little bit about Castellini Group of Companies. I mean, I know they're a diverse group, but just so the listening audience kind of, or people who are watching this later, they just kind of get an idea of the organization you are, in fact.
Right. So Bob Castellini owns the Cincinnati Reds, which is not an essential business and is finally getting back into baseball. So we're all excited about that. He is the third generation. So his grandfather started this company. It was wholesale, it was produce, it was shipping. So all of those things are still here, and that's the essential part. So we bring produce in from the West Coast and distribute it to customers like Kroger. We sell tomatoes to Safeway, or not Safeway, Subway. So it's food service, it's retail shops. We service other wholesalers. So we have a lot of trucks. So we have about 450 people in the building I work in. We have about 70 in Atlanta, in addition to a bunch of other companies that really weren't essential and shut down. So I think the interesting thing is we kept running through this whole thing.
Right. So you guys, you literally didn't have a second to catch your breath. You had to keep pushing. Interesting. So like the next day, you guys came to work.
Yeah. And what was even, we sort of had the triple hat of issues. So in January, we decided to shut down 2 places and consolidate them here in April. When COVID hit, we got together and said, do we go ahead with this or we postpone it? We said, no, we go ahead. So we're in the middle of a big consolidation project. COVID hit, so we had to deal with the people. And then, of course, there was a couple weeks there where I know I was going in the store and the only vegetables they had were like rhubarb and kale and weird things because all the potatoes were gone, the lettuce was gone, the carrots were gone. So we were getting calls saying, what do you have in the warehouse? Just ship it. And that's why you ended up with all that weird stuff in Kroger. It cleaned out our warehouse. And then Kroger called us and said, we can't deliver our stores. Can you do that? Yes, we'll ramp up and send our trucks directly to your stores. And then they called back and said, okay, we got this now. Thank you very much. Goodbye. So our business, and of course, all of the subways and all of them shut down. So that business disappeared overnight. The other business went through the roof and then it came back down again. So for probably 2 months, we never knew when we came in the morning what we were going to be doing that day. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
That was exciting.
It's hard to plan your week out.
Yes.
To say the least. So, okay. So that was, I think it was a Thursday night when all this kind of stuff started going down. So what was the next day? What was your very first step that you took in trying to create a safe workplace?
I started pulling the HR managers together every morning because we live in the tri-state. So Ohio would do things, and then a week later, Kentucky would do things, and then 2 months later, Indiana would do things, and the CDC was doing things. So we pulled our HR managers together every morning, and actually we're still meeting. The vice president of public affairs, her job is to listen to all these governors every day and come to us in the morning with what's new. And if you recall, in March, they were telling us don't wear masks, right?
Yep.
So we didn't wear masks, but we said, we're probably smart to take temperatures. So we got online immediately. And of course, Amazon Prime says they'll be there tomorrow. We ordered 10 thermometers. It was like 2.5 weeks before we got them. They came from China. And when we got them, half of them were broken. So we put together plans as fast as we could. When we finally decided to put people in masks, we ordered them. It was weeks before we got them. Yeah. So things, it would be nice to say everything went real smoothly. It didn't. We jumped on things, I think, fairly early. Again, I used my experience with SARS and said, we're going to need these things. Let's get them. My boss said, yes, we bought them, but we didn't always get everything right away. So we did start taking temperatures probably by the 1st of April. By the middle of April, we had everybody in masks. Okay. Social distancing, building new break areas, putting up plexiglass, washing hands, all the stuff about. Locked down the building, sent everybody home that we could, which was really finance, IT, HR, kept everybody else here. And since then, we've brought almost everybody back. But yeah.
So it sounds to me like, as a kind of overarching kind of rule of thumb, taking some action is better than doing nothing.
Right. And communicating. I mean, so much of this was about what are we telling the employees? We had a huge faction of people that literally refused to wear the masks. So we reminded, and then finally we said, if you don't wear these masks, and I didn't give them the masks. I gave them masks. I said, if you want to wear anything, we don't care. Bring it in. Have your mother make it. We don't care. Just get something over your face. We eventually did have to start disciplining people until they realized we were serious.
Just out of curiosity, what were people's reasons for not wanting to wear the mask?
I have no right to make them wear a mask at work.
Gotcha. Yeah, I know the way I look at it, and when I go to Kroger or wherever, I put the mask on. I don't know if it's doing any good, but it's not stopping me from doing anything. Right. Now, if I were out taking a jog or something and they said, hey, you got to put a mask on, I'd draw the line there. But going into a closed area, we got to be reasonable. This is one of those things that, you've been through it, but most of us have not. Yeah. I think we got to be a little more flexible. So that's interesting. Is there anything that you would have done in hindsight? And I know this is crazy because hindsight's always 20/20, but would have you done things differently if you now that you know what you know?
Yeah. I underestimated the toll this was taking on the managers. I could see it on the employees, but the managers just needed to suck it up and get through it. And we're all human. So I don't know what people's situations are at home, if they have a vulnerable person in their house, if their husband is at home, laid off, trying to teach 4 kids school. Like, I didn't know what was going on with every single person. And I probably didn't put enough effort into making sure that all the managers were mentally okay as we launched into this consolidation, the business thing, and all that stuff. So I would have done that differently. We just finished. We haven't had a hit yet, by the way. So awesome. We got 450 people in here. I'm bringing in 25 to 50 temps a day. Some of them are homeless, flipping people every day. They're coming in on a bus. They're supposed to have their temperatures taken. I know they're not. So we did some really good work, and we have been incredibly lucky. I know that. I did not get the protocol together early on what are we going to do if we get a hit? Who do we call in the health department? Do we even need to call them? Like, it took one of my associates 2 hours to even figure out what's the phone number we're supposed to call when we get a hit. So we finally got that together. We've been lucky. We haven't had a hit up until this point. So there's clearly things, we would have done differently in hindsight. I don't think we screwed up too much. But again, it was a very bumpy road, I think, in the beginning.
Well, I think getting back to what we just said a few minutes ago, taking some action, you're doing more than just taking action. You're actually showing the folks that work there that you actually care. And I think that's a huge, that says a lot, that if you're going to work, and even if you're the lowest line temp employee, right, the Castellini group of companies cares enough about your well-being that they're doing something. Even if the rest of the world is going insane. Yeah. So that says a lot. Yeah. So excellent.
Yeah, we're trying.
Yeah, without a doubt, that's all you can do. But so what type of unique challenges are you having to deal with, and what are some of the things you've had to do?
So I think communication's been a big thing. There's lots of communication out there. You can drive yourself nuts watching the news and looking at Facebook, which I do. So we started doing monthly town hall meetings. We had been doing them quarterly in a conference room. We said, we can't do the conference room. Let's go outside. And when we went outside, we said, we have plenty of room. Let's invite everybody. So we started shutting the operation down. Everybody comes out to the town hall meeting in a mask, social distance, including the temps. Yep. And we do an update on what's going on. That has been wonderful. And actually, after COVID's over, we're going to keep doing these town halls outside, even when it's freezing outside, because I think it was the right thing to do to include everybody. We had no work from home policy. Right. And of course, when you send people home, you've got managers saying, I don't think they're working. How can they possibly be working if they're educating their children? I had people that were working from home saying, this is working great. How can I do this forever? Right.
Right.
We have no policy. So the adjustment for us is, the future of work is going to be a lot of working from home. I see a lot of companies now saying you guys can work from home forever. And we can't live in the world we were living in saying the work is here only. So we're trying to think now about what is a reasonable policy to put in place for a business like this to have people flexibly working from home. So that's another thing that I think is going to change for us permanently that we've had to deal with. And just trying to meet people where they are. So again, I've got people that think this whole thing's a hoax and they don't want to wear their masks. I've got people that are scared to death to come to work because they think they're going to get it and die.
Right.
People's behaviors change from day to day. And I sit there when they say things to me, some people, and say, where is this coming from? And then you realize we're all stressed out. We just need to take a breath and try to meet each other where we are. And at the same time, maintain our standards and not let people freak out and say things they shouldn't be saying and do things they shouldn't be doing. So you've got this standard of work you've got to maintain, at the same time trying to be sympathetic, empathetic to people. And then on top of this, all of the Black Lives Matter stuff that hit, and of course also impacts how people are at work.
So we touched on a couple of things. I was going to circle back to the mental health issue, which I think that you addressed, and then I think your town hall meetings, I'm sure, is having a positive impact. I think, what are your thoughts about mental health going forward? I think it's almost something that I feel, and maybe me as a manager as well, have not always paid attention to that. And it sounds like and so going forward, I think is your belief that that's going to have to be more of a focus, not Absolutely. Just beyond the pandemic.
Absolutely. So we signed up an employee assistance program about 2 years ago, which frankly hardly anybody uses, and that's normal. So when COVID hit, we wrote a letter to the families about the EAP program, explained what it is, explained it was confidential, it's free, and we literally mailed these things to 450 employees because our thought was maybe somebody else in the family will use it, and the employee would never even tell them it was eligible. They were eligible for it. So I believe the usage has gone up. Again, it's very confidential, but I can see kind of numbers of people using it. So we have referred a lot of people to EAP. I have told people in the past I've used EAP. I mean, you don't need to be on the brink of a mental breakdown in order to use this. You have concerns about your parents, you can call EAP. So we've done that. We've started having, which is another thing we're going to continue, daily little shift team meetings. Okay. So people get together with their team in the morning. Let's talk about how today's going to go. Let's talk about any issues we have. And that gives people in a safe environment with their direct work team, little groups, 10 people, to say, here's a concern I have. So we've started doing that, again, to address it. And there's a lot of privacy issues around mental health. We've just got to be careful, right? But offer. Right. Train the managers. We're doing that as well. So I
jotted down a couple words while you were saying communication, inclusion, and safety. And I think you nailed all three in your last little statement. So that was awesome. Yeah. And then also you mentioned you had some managers that were convinced that people working from home were not working. So I want to share this tidbit. So I've been managing domestic and internationally remote workers for, it's over 20 years now. I'm getting old. I've had, in that entire time, I've had two people that couldn't function well in that environment. They just weren't doing the job they were doing. And you know what? You address those and you hire good people that you can trust. Because most people, I think inherently it's a human trait that we want to succeed and we want to feel challenged. So I think we overrate a little bit that you have to be able to see people working. Most people are not lazy. That's just not the case.
Yeah. No. And the thing is, generationally, here we have a lot of baby boomers in leadership positions. We have some of the generation before that. And at that point, when we didn't have computers, work was a place you went.
You had to,
For many people, work is still a place you go versus the thing you do.
Right.
So when managers tell me I don't think they're working, do they respond to you when you reach out to them? Yes. Are they doing what you need them to do every week? Yes. So what's the problem? I can't imagine they're working enough. Well, then you're not giving them enough to do,
Exactly.
Let's get real here. Let's measure the work and not the fact that they're not sitting with butts in seats.
I mean, and let's be
education.
Yeah, and let's be candid with everybody listening. You and I were texting last night. What is it, about 7:30, something like that? So clearly we were working and we were well after hours. So that's the way people work today. So it's okay.
Yeah.
So awesome. So as this pandemic drags on, and it looks like it's going to be a long time. I don't think it's going to end soon. Obviously, are you going to continue to evolve your approach? I'm assuming the answer is yes, but
we are. There's things that I need to still do. Work from home. We need a policy for this, and we need to let people do it and get everybody okay with it. and I know you're filming this, I don't want you to hear that I've got a whole bunch of managers that don't want people working from home. That is absolutely not the case, right?
Right.
We are all evolving, and most of us would enjoy working from home. So
Yeah.
we're trying to figure out how to make that work. I think the social distancing thing, and again, this is back to my experience in China. When SARS was over, people didn't touch each other. They continued to not touch each other. They continued to, I think the buffet is dead, right?
Yeah.
There's certain things that I don't think are going to come back, and we're going to have to just keep adjusting to those. So yeah, I need a work from home policy. If this thing gets worse, and remember, a lot of people said it's going away in the summer and coming back in the fall. Well, God help us if it comes back in the fall compared to what it is now.
Right.
I'm hoping there's going to be a 15-minute test by the fall. And then the question is, what do we do with that? Do we test everybody every day? Is the government going to allow me to test everybody? Do I hire a nurse? Do we put people in a holding pen until we've tested them before we let them come in? I don't know. But we're starting to think about, what is this thing going to look like? And then what's going to happen when I have 4, 5, 6 hits and I have to send 50 people home for 7 days to quarantine? How do I keep this place running? So that's the other thing we're trying to think about, because I'm assuming it's going to get worse before it gets better.
Well, and then have you even, fortunately, I'm in a smaller organization. We don't have any young kids yet, but I'm thinking about like daycare. Like my daughter, I have a grandson that was born during this thing, and we're trying to figure out how she can go back to work.
Exactly.
How can both grandpas and both grandmas help her out so she can actually go back to work? Her husband, fortunately, was able to go back to work, but now we're like, what do we do? We got an infant. We can't send an infant into
right.
What do we do? And it's not there's no easy answer.
It's not easy. And we're lucky we're 7-day, 24/7. So I can move people's shifts around if they request it. And we've done a lot of that, right? So I have the ability to do that. But you're absolutely right. I'm watching very closely what happens with schools, because if they don't open up, and grandma's been watching the kids as a favor all summer, this is about to become a problem.
Well, I think the key is somehow we're going to have to be adaptable as employers, as well as our employees are going to have to adapt. They may have to switch different shifts. I know somebody I was talking to, they've had to switch their shift. They're here, but it's a European company. They're working from like 2 a.m. to 9 a.m.
Right.
Because they've got daycare responsibilities, and the wife is a first responder. They can't do anything about it, So it is what it is. So this is interesting stuff. So you are on the one end where you just attacked right away, and God love you, respect to the max on that. But what do we say about companies that have been kind of sitting on the sideline? I mean, what would you recommend to somebody who's just maybe they tried to wait it out? I don't know. Maybe that's what their game plan was. I don't know. But what do we say to them?
I would say there is plenty of information out there now to get started. Yeah. So I would just Google whatever it is you want to know. It's out there. And there are tons of companies having the same kind of discussion we're having today. I think the important things, if you're just now getting started, is communication, and ramp it up if you haven't, because people are paranoid. They want more information. The rumors fly around a lot faster than they used to. People are reading things that aren't true on social media, et cetera. So I think how you're communicating with your employees is important. And whatever you're doing, I would probably ramp it up. We did. Think about what your strategy is. Because if your strategy is hang back until the government makes me do something, that's fine. But have a vehicle so the day the government makes you do something, you can go do it, right? Yeah. So again, in my case, Ohio was always a week or two ahead of Kentucky. So I ignored Kentucky and Indiana. And what we talked about is, what's Ohio doing? California was ahead of Ohio. So we were actually watching California. California just did this. What does that mean for us? Because we're going to be doing it soon. So if your strategy is hang back and wait, at least know what's likely to come next, and get online. There's forms, there's policies, there's companies that can help you set it up. Be ready. Because the last thing you want, depending on what kind of industry you're in, is to have to shut down because you weren't ready, right?
Right.
When the thing came, when push come to shove and you had to do something. So I think those are the two things. I would really work on communication, and I would just work on being ready based on the tea leaves that you've got that you're looking at.
Well, and I think that you touched on it there. What's the cost of missing a single shift?
Right.
And compare that to the cost of doing something. It's probably a fraction of what it would be to have that shift not show up. So,
And frankly, the cost of doing something's a whole lot cheaper. I was spending
Yeah.
twice as much as I should have for those temperature screeners,
yeah.
5 times as much as I should have for the masks, and the price on everything's come back down to reasonable now too.
Right, which is good. I mean, that's
Yeah.
what, and obviously your approach doesn't work for every company. Every company has to figure out what's right for them. But by sitting and doing nothing, you're not going to figure it out. That's for sure.
No, and just be prepared. I mean, I have a friend that's in the same industry, and she's had a whole bunch of people test positive. And I was actually talking to her yesterday. I said, well, I know who I'm calling. As soon as we get a positive test, I'm calling you because you've done this. I have policy, but I haven't done it. She goes, yeah, just call me. So that's the other thing, like reach out to other companies that are in different situations and use each other.
Yeah, and I talked to I was talking to a client of ours just before, just a little bit earlier, and same thing. They had somebody come in positive, and it was, they didn't know till after but they already had a plan in place to say they knew where everybody was at, who they come in contact with. They were able to kind of close that area, get it clean, have those people quarantined and tested, and then they backfilled with other people, and they didn't really miss a beat. And it turns out that nobody else got sick, so it worked out just fine. That was the only person, and they've recovered, so now it's fine. So, but the key is they had a plan, and that's what you just said. Have your game plan and be ready to go.
Right.
Cool.
Right.
So I knew this time would go incredibly fast, so we've only got a couple minutes left. So do you have any last or comments or that you want to share with anybody? And also, if I haven't really been paying attention to the chat room because we've been having so enthralled in the conversation. So if anybody has questions for Bonnie, please go ahead and put them in now, and we'll make sure we touch on them. So anyway, any last thoughts or any ideas?
I mean, my last thought is a personal thought. Like I said, I have 4 kids. They're all grown up. Everybody's complaining about everything. Can't go to school. Can't, my son owns a company, having trouble, blah, blah. And I said, this is a window of opportunity when we're all stuck to go better yourself somehow. So learn to cook, get a pet, take up music again. We need something that we look forward to every day that brings us joy. And that helps us get through it. My thing was, I'm going to do a good deed every day. So I would drive through McDonald's and buy the coffee for the person behind me. I was sending little gifts to people. And then after about a month, I ran out of ideas. So I said, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to phone every single person in my phone book and talk to them.
That is awesome.
It was incredible. I'm not done yet, but I have talked to people in Singapore, in Sao Paulo, Brazil, in Europe. And now it's pretty cheap to do that. I talked to 2 women that I knew growing up. One is 96 from Ireland. One is 90 from France. And they were both in Europe during the war. Okay. And I said, how does this compare? And the French woman said, well, the Germans were in France. Yeah. It was cold. We didn't have enough food. I said, and she's holed up in New York City now, miserable. She's 90. And I said, well, that was worse than this. And she goes, oh, no, Bonnie, I was 15. It was exciting. Now I'm 90. So it just helps put everything in perspective. Everybody's happy when you call. So if you don't know what to do, I would highly recommend doing that. Every week, call a couple people. And that has been a real adventure for me. So find something that brings joy that you have time to do now that you may not, even if it's cleaning out your closet, do it. Yeah. And I tell you, for me, it's helped me wake up kind of ready to go every morning.
It's interesting. And I'll share mine for everyone to listen to. So I have years ago when my kids were little, I built a home workout room. I use that thing about 10% of the time. In all honesty, it sits there and gains dust. But after about maybe a weekend, the last week of March, I realized that I'm a person who's a very a regimented person, but my regimen for work was destroyed. So I had to have something I could anchor my day around. So every morning at 6:30, starting like the last week of March, I go into that weight room and I lift every day, and I'm still doing it. So it's become my pattern, and it's become almost like like you said, I wake up in the morning and say, oh, today is back day. Yes, I can get in there and do, and I feel good about myself. And the rest of the day may go insane, and that's all right. I've done that one thing, and I've got that next thdo tomorrow morning to look forward to, and it works. It's great. And I did do the also went through the what do you call it, the Rolodex, and just started texting people. It's not a Rolodex anymore, it's on my phone, but I started texting people to say, hey, how are you doing? How are you feeling? And the positives that came back were just amazing. You learn stuff about it. It's been pretty cool, actually. Yeah. So, well, this was awesome. Well, Bonnie, thank you so much. This was extremely informative, and I just appreciate the fact I know you're extremely busy, and you just were a leader on this. And I wanted everybody here what you've done, and I think it's important that people should know.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
I'm going to hit you up to come back in a few months because this thing ain't over. So
well,
okay.
and I'll probably have hits to report at that
That's
point.
okay.
But
It's good. A company your size, it's going to happen. It just you're going to run out of luck, but you've done a great job, and I know your employees look at Castellini and say they care enough about us.
Yeah.
They're thinking that, and companies who aren't doing anything, you might want to ask what your employees are thinking.
It's time. It's time.
Awesome. Well, this has been great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take care. Goodbye, everyone.